It's the Solution Simplified podcast from SpartanPOS. We'll not only talk to the innovators and the people that make things happen in the industry, we'll get the background story. How did they get here? What influenced them? What's their educational background and what do they like to do away from work? We'll try to get you the full story and all of the details on the movers and shakers in the point-of-sale technology industry. So this is the maiden voyage for the SpartanPOS Solution Simplified podcast. I'm Craig Kalibi. I'm here with a really good friend of mine who's also been a mentor to me, and I used to report to him at one time. Mr. Stephen Bergeron. How you doing,
Hey,
Stephen?
doing great. We got a little bit of snow up here in the mountains today, about 5 inches, so we're loving life.
Yeah, you're one of the few guys that gets really happy when it snows.
Oh, I get very happy when it snows. I'm probably one of the few people in my household of two that gets really happy. No, we should scratch that. But
So you brought out the bow tie today, and for some that don't know, before the pandemic, you'd never see this guy without a bow tie, and your Twitter, which now X handle is Bowtie Steven, but there's even more significance to it than that, isn't there?
So, yeah, the bow tie goes back to about 35 of my 40 years in this business. As a matter of fact, when I was at Vartech last year, Mike Hansen of Star came up to me and he said, "Oh, the bow tie's back. It's great to see. Don't lose it again. That's kind of your brand as you go forward." So, yeah, the bow tie is back for sure.
And now today, it really is part of your brand, isn't it? You've got a new company, a new business venture that you're unveiling here.
Absolutely. And it's been fun. When I left APG, what am I going to do? Do I want another, high career with a new company? What do you want to do when you grow up? I'm only 68 years old, so what do you want to do when you grow up? And the decision was made that I want to give back to this community that's been so generous to myself and my family, quite frankly, over the last 40 plus years. And so what do I want to do? Steve Inc., Miko. I mean, I went through all over the place. But during the pandemic, my wife and I started to come up to Maine and hide. We were fortunate enough to have a small condo up here during the pandemic. We started to stay more and more. And at the end of the pandemic, Kathy was retired at the time, and we made the decision to move up here full time. So we are tied to the mountains, skiing in the winter, cycling, kayaking, canoeing in the summer months. So mountain ties kind of plays a double entendre, the ties, but our hearts are tied here in the mountain. And it just seems like a fresh start for the Bergerons up here in Bethel, Maine.
Well, that's great. So what is your primary focus with this new business venture?
As I kind of alluded to, I want to give back to this community. What does that mean? Channel sustainability for the last 30 years has been discussed at organizations like the RSPA for a long, long time. And as I look over the last probably 20 years of the 40 that I've been in it, as more and more of the gray hairs start to retire, myself included in that conversation now, which is hard to believe. The guys that I looked up to when I first joined into this industry, they've all left. They're all retired on a golf course somewhere. And it was that learning and sales ethic that I think I'm starting to see is disappearing from the industry quite a bit. And it's not just, selling techniques and styles. It's some of the marketing information. It's a whole bunch of how we used to run this group within, the POS. And as I've started to talk to friends in other industries, it's missing there too. We're trying to find the easy way out, the silver bullet, as they all say, and it's not working. every industry I talk to is talking about the race to the bottom, and it's complicated and it's difficult to say the least.
You always used to talk to me about the difference between being transactional and kind of transformational. And
Yep,
that race to the bottom is transactional.
absolutely.
The race to profitability is transformative.
I there was I had a reseller partner out of Atlanta a number of years ago. It goes back to my printer days at Axiom. And she used to talk about, are you chasing revenue, transactional, or are you chasing business, strategic? And when you're chasing revenue, you're chasing the buck.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, I'm still going to have sales revenue coming into my coffers. But if I'm going about it strategically, I have a methodology that I'm going to use. I have a methodology that I'm going to follow. There's a strategy behind how I develop a proposal, how I develop the relationship to get to the proposal. And when I follow those guidelines, I'm not racing to the bottom, because when I'm racing to the bottom, I'm looking for the next buck. Mark Olson always used to talk about, is it a barnacle customer or is it a butterfly customer?
We like
And
barnacles.
we like the barnacles. What is the life one-time cost of a customer? Okay, that's cool. Yeah, it helped for a little bit, but what is the lifetime value of that customer that you've worked so hard to nurture the relationship with? It's huge. Some of the relationships that we had when you and I were working together, they were 35, 40 years old.
Yeah.
Holy moly. I mean, you just think about that lifetime value versus chasing the next deal.
Well, and there's the emotional bank account that goes into that as well. I mean, even though you and I weren't in those roles for 30 years, there was that legacy of both of those, the companies,
Mm-hmm.
the vendor and the customer that have played that role for those 30 years. And there's a lot of equity that gets built up in that.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of
Yep.
trust. There's a lot of partnership. And so I think what you're conveying, and I got a chance to read some of your blog posts that are going to be coming out. I'm guessing you're going to keep tweaking them a little bit
Yep.
as we all do, but really what it describes is a process for how you identify those barnacles, how you cultivate those barnacles, and ultimately how you close business with those barnacles and turn them into long-term lasting relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a little bit behind on launching Mountain Ties. I joked about being 68. I kind of had an issue with my back shortly after I left APG, and it's not until late January that I got medical clearance to go get aggressive again and start to move forward. So I'm a tad behind, but you're going to be seeing a new LinkedIn page and an update to my page. I'll have a website here in the not too distant future. But I was able to work on blogs sitting with a laptop on my lap, no pun intended. And I just started to think about that whole sales process and how it evolved that when we were together at APG, and how it can go forward as we know it. And it starts internally with our all hands on deck. You and I talked the other day about the football analogy within sales, right? The quarterback is the sales guy, but if the quarterback doesn't have an offensive line, he's flat on his back. If you don't have a defensive line, the quarterback can't score enough points with his offense. So it really does take an entire team to close business in 2025. So have you identified what those key components are to your solution?
So the pandemic was kind of a blessing in disguise in the sense because, at least for us, when we were working together, it allowed us to do a lot of internal analysis to figure out what our strengths and weaknesses were, SWOT analysis. And that
Mhm.
really helped us kind of formulate our strategy as to how we were going to go forward. And I think that's kind of what you're proposing here.
Yeah, I think the pandemic did a couple of things. First and foremost, pre-pandemic, we were road warriors,
Hmm.
and you get every Monday morning, you'd suit up, you'd go, you'd have your meetings throughout the course of the week, 1, 2, 3 cities, whatever the case may be, and you'd come home and you'd work on the proposals and whatever, and you'd go back out and present them. Pandemic changed. We had to still stay in business. So how do you convey through this medium that we're using today, which is very efficient for what we're doing, and when you use it properly, it's great. So how do we use this medium and still get the message across? Well, the first thing is you have to understand what is your message, and I think that's what you were talking about in the SWOT analysis,
Hmm.
and then knowing what your message is the first step of step one. The second step of step one is how do you convey that message? How do you uncover, how do you deliver that message in such a way that you're building trust within that prospect and soon to be customer, but how do you uncover if it's the right fit? But you also don't want it to sound like the Spanish Inquisition, right? You don't want 72 questions and bow, 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 bow. That's so I call it story selling. And it's just how do you engage in a conversation that's logical, that's pulling information out. It's discovery. It's, you know, 30 years ago we called it qualifying the account, but it's really discovery to make sure there's a match. And
Yeah.
then it it kind of comes together that way.
Well, and I think we touched on this briefly, but my theory is every time a customer engages with you, whether they send you an email, they call you, they have a meeting with you, they stop by your booth at a trade show,
Hmm.
they have challenges, maybe not problems, but they have challenges that they're looking for solutions. And they're constantly seeking for solutions. Sometimes they don't know the degree or the nature of those challenges. Sometimes they don't know what kind of solution they want. They just know that, all right, this is kind of a sore spot and I need some help here. And I think what you're talking about with this discovery process is trying to find the synergy between the strengths of the company that you're representing and the challenges that the customer presents and trying to find that common area, that overlap where their solutions can help solve those problems.
Yes, but it's also more than that. In this dialogue or in these conversations, as they take place over days, weeks, months, as the case may be, you've also got to be building trust at the same time. So you can't come across as the huckster, right?
Right.
You've got to have that trusted advisor role that Jim Roddy talks about so much, and rightly so.
Hmm.
Because if we don't have trust at the base of this relationship, it's going to be really hard.
Well, it's a cadence, and we were talking about quarterbacks before, but it's a cadence in the sense that you don't just go in with your first meeting guns blazing and say, well, what about this? What about that? Like you said, it can't be the Inquisition. It can't
No,
be 70 questions and you're just pounding the guy for information. It's something it's kind of a gradual process that it's almost like a tennis match. It goes back and forth. And
absolutely. It's a
when you
give and
start,
take.
you're going to
Yeah.
volley.
Yep. No, for sure. And you know what happened going back to the pandemic and selling in general, it kind of changed into this 3 or 4 step process. I call it the ecosystem. So now we've done all of the discovery. We find we have a good fit. So let's go give them a quote. And I'm there is a place for a quote, don't get me wrong.
Yep.
But if this is a big opportunity that you've worked a lot of months on, I think we should go in with a formal proposal. Now, back 35 years ago, that's all we ever did. I mean, holy moly, did we do proposals. Um, and I think the pandemic forced us to go back to the proposal because that gave us the ability to re-enable that relationship. Why do I say re-enable? A quote doesn't enable a relationship. It just says, here's the stuff, you know, this is how much at the end of the day. The formal proposal gives you that opportunity to say, hey, we've spent a lot of time together. I learned a lot about your business and your issues. This is what we learned. We talked about a solution. This is the solution. And hey, let's just refresh how much of the company, going back to the opening of our conversation here, is involved in it. And oh, by the way, here's the quote, if you will, with the parts, pieces, parts, and all of that fun stuff. But you walk somebody through with that proposal, the last bunch of communication that you've had with them. And it's like, wow, this sales guy listened. Yeah, I remember I met the CEO. Yeah, I met the VP of engineering or the head of product. And if you're a small dealer, it may be, and you have a service group, make sure you invite the service manager into one of the meetings and just talk about what they do. And all of a sudden, reminds everybody everything they've done in this proposal, and it's not just pieces and parts. And here's a quote
Well,
with an estimated delivery.
and it's a team effort. I think you said in one of your blog posts, 5.3 people on average have a stake in a decision on a
Mm-hmm.
major proposal or a major project like that. And I think that as you talk about all of the aspects of the proposal, it's building trust, it's building familiarity, it's building partnership. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the price isn't everything because let's face it, if it's Black Friday and that system fails, you need somebody that's going to be able to respond, that's going to understand what your
Yep.
situation is going to have some empathy and is going to prioritize helping you fix that issue. Hopefully it
I
never
think so.
happens, but
Yeah. Inevitably, it's going to be that one store point of sale terminal, and it's Friday or Saturday or whatever, whatever the worst
yeah,
shopping day of the week is for that
yeah,
store,
yeah,
which is their best revenue days when that the system's going to go down. And now what do you do? How do you
right.
help me, coach?
Exactly. So there's a lot to it that you talk about, how you build that. You go through that cadence, you build that
Mm-hmm.
relationship, you gain that knowledge, that understanding. And I think it's a sharing of information because they're learning things about your organization as well and how you can help fix their problems. And then you do the proposal and
Mm-hmm.
then, all right, you win it. Now you've got to execute.
Now you got to execute. And I think, you know, eh, I've always been a believer in a QBR, but one of the things that happened during the pandemic is we found it harder and harder to talk to people. And the QBR, again, as you're building that relationship, the historic QBR was predominantly revenue based. It might be, you might have a handful of KPIs that you're talking about, but I don't think it was a company engagement. When you went on site, yeah, they had a lot more meat to them. So, one of the things I think we have to do within the QBR is go back to the proposal. What did we build the relationship with or on? Excuse me. And that QBR really has to become a joint business review. It's a two-way mirror, so to speak. And there has to be that this is what we said we were going to do 30, 60, 90, 180 days ago. Are we living up to that expectation? And that's a two-way question, right? Okay, we're doing great. Well, we're not doing so great on some of the areas. Well, what are the areas? What are the problems? What do we have to change? Going forward, are these the assumptions we need for the next 90 to 180 days? Yes or no? Are they changing? Okay, perfect. We'll make those adjustments. Is there any long-term vision that you have about your business? And that's a great question internally where you can share, hey, we're coming out with a couple of new products in 2026. We'd love to show you now. What's your opinion on them? Because for all you know, that customer has new and emerging ideas about their business. No, but we are going to Mexico. Oh, great. Hey, we have a cash drawer that deals with pesos, or we're going into Canada. We have a cash drawer that deals with Canadian dollars. The dimensions are different than those five bill, five coin in the United States. Whatever the case may be, it's now building a rapport. It started with a great relationship, and it goes forward now because you're starting to trust each other and you're letting people see what's going on in your business. And that was really totally different from the old style QBR that I was familiar with.
Yeah, it wasn't so focused on the numbers because let's face it, in today's day and age, we can use AI to analyze a data sheet or a
Mm-hmm.
report or an Excel pivot table, something like that. We can use, there's all sorts of analytics tools that can help us find the insights in that. But I think where the business review, I think you called it a joint business review process, where I think was effective was, what were the objectives that we stated last time? What were some of the things that we needed to what were our goals?
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the things that were working well? What were some of the things that needed help? And then my favorite one, and I know it's your favorite as well, was the elephant in the room slide.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that was
So
just, I'll let you elaborate.
no, I call it the elephant in the room because
It's what it was.
it's really what it was, and it could be our elephant or their elephant. Um, and I think it's important if we don't ask that hard question, if we don't address, it used to be the objection you don't address in the sales cycle is the objection that you're going to lose the business on. So if there's a problem hiding in a closet somewhere within a customer and you don't address it, it it's going to be that's going to be the objection that kills you
There's
long
a
term.
football analogy to that. When you look at the playoffs, every team that loses in the playoffs, it's because there is one weakness that that team has that they were not able to overcome. Either it was an injury that they couldn't get over, or
Yep.
there was a particular strategy that they couldn't overcome. Look at the last Super Bowl. Kansas City's offensive line had been a little shaky all year. They they paid the price because that was
Yeah.
Philly's strength. Not sorry, had to put my sports hat on for just a second there, but
Just
it's
a
it's the
second.
same thing in business.
It
Like you
is.
said, there was an objective or some type of initiative that you weren't able to cover completely. There's always going to be a weakness until you're able to address that.
Yep. And if you've built that, now going back to the discovery mode, if you've built trust up over the last six months to a year, whatever your number is, you have the equity in this relationship to be able to address the hard questions, the hard problems. So don't be afraid to ask them. And quite frankly, it's your ability to answer and solve those hard questions that will continue to put equity into the relationship. And I think when you have that, the other comment I've heard repeatedly as I've talked to some folks about, the need for a JBR and why I think it's so important. When it's just a backwards look, and we talked about this the other day, the conversation isn't that rich. But when
Um,
you open it up and expand it like we did, the conversation gets super rich. And now you start to get executive buy-in and interest in the JBR. Where are you going and what's going on? And how do we better leverage each other's talents and skills? And I think when you get that, that's when these rich discussions come up. So that elephant in the room can actually change your relationship. If you're on the edge with somebody, just calling it out, and then this is how we're going to fix it, and it's going to take us X to fix it. here you go. And, you know, there was always an elephant. Sometimes it was a baby elephant. Sometimes it was pretty bloody big,
I
but it got
I th-
addressed.
I think it's kind of comparable to there are times when you have conflict within a business relationship. Maybe there's a quality issue or a delivery issue or just
Mm-hmm.
something that didn't go the way you would have liked it to go. There's two things that can happen. One, you can lose the customer. Two, you can come out of it stronger. And I think we've all gone through our battles
Mm-hmm.
through those things because it's manufacturing, it's business, things happen, sometimes out of your control, but it's how you respond to those things and how you're able to address them, whether it's an elephant in the room or it's a major delivery issue or quality concern, whatever it is. Um, if you're able to come through that, a lot of times you can come out of that with a better relationship and a better understanding, better empathy, better trust. And I think that's a lot of what the components of your program really brings is it kind of teaches you how to implement those strategies that
Mm-hmm.
prepares you for those situations.
Well, one of the things too, yes, it is, but early on in what will become my first blog post here in the next probably 2 weeks, I talk about the importance of including uh, I'll be a wise guy, everybody in the company. But if we all know what the sales message is, and we all understand what the sales process is, when you bring somebody into an account that isn't normally, whatever that lovely
Hmm.
word means, involved in an account, they get to understand what's happening. And, then they can talk to the people underneath them, and it becomes a team sell.
It
And
does.
I really believe that within all my heart. So everybody's fighting for the same goal line decision. And if we don't do that, then you start to get, well, how did they make that commitment or whatever the case may be? And there still may be some of that, but I think overall, the more people we get involved in the sale, the stronger the company looks. And ultimately, yeah, they're buying a widget, but they're buying a widget from a company. I I don't remember how long ago I took a American Management Association week-long sales training, stay in a hotel. You're up till the wee hours of the morning practicing and going over all of the stuff you're learning during the course of the day. And
I think I did that class too.
at the end of the week, the guy stands up, gives us all our diplomas for completing the class. And he says, and don't forget, people buy from folks they know, like, and trust.
It's true.
Know, like, and trust. Now, had he started the week off, he couldn't have kept this for a week because the genie was out of the bottle. But it's still, I don't know, 30 years later, that's still the reality. So you've got to. All of these are little stepping stones. Some of them not so little to creating that relationship.
Absolutely. So, um, we've talked about the process of putting all the information together,
Yeah.
figuring out your strengths, doing the discovery, um, not just issuing a quote, but doing a proposal and really understanding what makes the customer tick. And then once you get the business running, a joint business review, not just looking in the rearview mirror, but looking forward. How can you guys work together? How can you help each other?
Mm-hmm.
Who are some of the companies? Give me some profiles of the companies that you're looking to help. Who is out there that you want to help?
It's funny. I When I started this venture, I had a very narrow focus of the resellers and the ISVs potentially. And as I started talking to friends that I've had over the years, um, I've had a couple of distributors say, "Well, could you help me with some of my offshore vendors that are coming into the country and they have one mindset. So this this sales philosophy, maybe parts of it aren't perfect for them, but we have spent years teaching each other about the channel, the two-tier indirect channel. I've developed some strategies around two-tier channel selling that I'm in the process of preparing to present to a couple of companies. Um, Front end selling, I've got one of the larger companies in the industry very interested in the JBR process. They think their front end, they have a proposal process, but they gave up on the QBRs because they just weren't rich enough. So, I'm working with them. How do you create richness in there? So I'm really ISVs, dealers, resellers, that community. Yes, I have things that I can work with and educate there. Um, vendors, vendor relationships, starting to work in that. And I've been approached by a couple of distributors. Can I help them and their customers along the way?
Well, I think you even mentioned to me the other day that there are some venture capital companies that, we've all worked for companies that might have been owned by venture capital. Some of them are better at it than others, and there's certainly some stigmas that go along with that. But you mentioned that you've been approached by at least one or two venture capitalists saying, "Help us kind of understand what we're getting
Yeah.
into."
Um,
I think that's
that
great.
it's not as advanced as maybe I made it sound the other day, but private
Mhm.
equity and venture capital, they're looking for help. Do I have a product problem in the company I just bought, or do I have a sales problem, or do I have a something else problem? Um, and the discussions are interesting. I don't know where they're going to lead. It was certainly not, in my prospectus when I first started to develop it. It still isn't in it, but the conversations are intriguing for sure. Can you help us with the analysis?
I think it's synergistic though with
Hmm.
what you bring to the table. There's no doubt it's synergistic, and I think that it could be helpful not
Uh,
only for you but also for all of the people that are at the company that's getting acquired.
no, I'm never going to say never. It was an
Yeah.
eye opener. The other thing too is I've had one totally outside of my normal world, and I've talked to one of my mentors in this modeling, and his thing was stick to your core, stick to your Rolodex, that not to your
Yeah.
CRM package, but stick to your Rolodex.
Right.
But what you've developed here is anybody centric. I mean, you go out, you listen, you learn, but this process is scalable regardless of size of the company, regardless of verticals. We all have the same challenges. We really don't know what our core competencies are. Oh, that's a problem regardless of
That's
industry,
that's a big problem. Yeah. It's a big
so
problem.
see where you go from there.
So Stephen, if a company's out there that needs some help, how can they get a hold of you?
Uh, Today, the easiest way is Stephen at mountainties.net, one word. Um, Long term, probably by the end of Q1, there'll be my normal LinkedIn page, which is still up, but it'll be more focused on what I'm doing today. And there'll be a Mountain Ties LinkedIn page, and I'll also have a website, most likely by the end of Q1. So I'm
And
excited about that.
we've got your all of your contact information up on the
Yep.
screen. So we'll be able to do that, and certainly we'll put links to contact you into the description as well. So for my maiden voyage of the podcast, I think it went pretty well. I
Yeah.
want to say thank you. I'm honored that you got the chance to be the first guy on here, and
Oh,
I wish you nothing but success. I can tell you that it was a pleasure when I got to work for you. I got to learn from you. Um, we didn't always get along on everything, but I thought we found a way to work through it a lot of times.
well,
It was
I
fun.
get along may be too strong. I don't know that we were always in agreement. How about we
Right. That's, yeah.
rephrase it to
Yeah.
that?
I think that's a good way to
Um,
put it. Yeah.
and I think, where you and I, where our discussions always got hung up is it tractional or strategic?
Yeah. Yep.
And I think if to anybody in the listening audience, if you guys can understand what and there's a place in everybody's business for both.
Hmm.
So I want to stress that. But everything isn't transactional. And
Correct.
it's how do you build it to get to the next level? Um, so I guess that if I had one parting thing is, you know, that's where you and I would have the little jabs back and forth. But it was fun.
It
And
was.
who knows?
It
Who
was.
knows?
Who
Life's
knows?
too short, man.
It is. Well, Stephen, I wish you all the success with Mountain Ties, and I hope that you have plenty of time to take several runs down the slopes as well. And I know that you mentioned you're 68. Stephen also rides his bike like what 100 miles a week? Is it
Yeah,
that?
about 100, yeah, 100 miles a week. Some weeks are more. If I have a great weekend, I can get 100 miles in on the weekend. So
Yeah, that's terrific.
I need to keep going. Yeah, today would be a beautiful snow day, but I've got another call in an hour or so, so there'll be no skiing today. But I might get up early tomorrow morning and hit the slopes before I'm in the office. Couple
Well,
of runs.
again, I appreciate it. I wish you success and good health. And all I can say is that the companies that are wise enough to engage with you, I think they'll be very, very pleased with the process. The JBR process to me, I thought was just really transformational. I thought it was really uh, easy to get the issues out in front of the customers, and it
Hmm.
just conveyed a really good sense of partnership. So I do appreciate it. And with that, this has been the first ever episode of the Spartan POS Solution Simplified podcast. And I just want to thank you, Stephen Bergeron, for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Craig, and thanks for reaching out. Hope you guys
Thanks.
got something out of it. We'll
Thanks.
see you on the
Appreciate it.
road. See you,
Take care,
Craig.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks. Thank you for joining us on the Solution Simplified podcast from Spartan POS. The Spartan POS YouTube channel is filled with hardware stories and technology information. If you'd like more information about the products we highlight or some of the solutions we talk about, please send us a message at info@spartanpos.com. You can also shop online at spartanpos.com and use code YT20 to take $20 off your first order.